A judge defends corrupt cops. Then, the black woman stands up as a U.S. attorney. A gavel strikes, echoing across the packed courtroom. Spectators crane their necks, tension thick in the air. At the center of it all, a poised black woman stands alone, eyes blazing with righteous determination. The judge, Ivan Carlisle, leans forward, lips twisted in a disdainful smirk, eager to discredit her. Everyone anticipates a swift humiliation. How could this lone voice combat the weight of the police, the system, and a seemingly untouchable judge? Yet behind the woman's calm facade lies an unshakable secret. In mere moments, the entire court will realize they have gravely underestimated her, and justice will have its day. It was a brisk morning in downtown Philadelphia when Adriana Du Bois hurried across Market Street, briefcase in hand. The wide smile on her face belied the stress that weighed on her shoulders. Today, she was scheduled to testify as a key witness in a police misconduct case, one that had rattled her community for months. A local reverend had asked Adriana, a recent Harvard Law graduate, to help gather evidence and statements after a series of ominous events. An unjust traffic stop here, a brutal beating there, and mounting allegations against two Philadelphia police officers known on the streets as the Teflon Twins, Officers Daniel Gleason and Peter Duggan. Despite their checkered record of complaints, these officers always seemed to walk away unscathed. They patrolled one of Philadelphia's rougher neighborhoods, relying on intimidation, a tight network of powerful friends, and the unwavering support of a local judge rumored to be in their pocket, Judge Ivan Carlisle. Everyone in the community knew that Carlisle favored the police. From the bench of the Philadelphia City Courthouse, he had dismissed countless complaints, leaving families baffled and victims without recourse. Adriana's involvement began modestly. She started by collecting sworn affidavits from victims, transcribing heart-wrenching stories of intimidation and violence. Soon, she became the face of the cause, young, brilliant, and fearless in her pursuit of justice. She worked late nights at a cramped community center office, sifting through mountains of papers, video footage from cell phones, and any shred of evidence that might hold the Teflon Twins accountable. Now, she was on her way to a hearing before Judge Carlisle. The atmosphere in the courthouse lobby felt different that day, tense and expectant. A group of protesters had gathered outside, holding signs demanding justice for victims of police brutality. Television cameras panned across the crowd. Reporters rattled off updates, speculating on the hearing's outcome. Some recognized Adriana as she passed. A few offered quick words of encouragement. "We're rooting for you, Ms. Du Bois," while others anxiously asked if she truly believed she could bring these officers to justice. Adriana took a steadying breath, pushing open the tall mahogany doors leading into courtroom 3B. Inside, the hum of hushed conversations filled the gallery. The families of victims were seated on one side. On the other side, uniformed officers sat in silent unity behind Gleason and Duggan. At the front of the room, perched on a high wooden dais, was Judge Carlisle himself. He was a towering figure with sharp features, his narrow eyes scanning the room with a dispassionate glare. As Adriana approached the plaintiff's table, her gaze briefly flickered to Carlisle. The faintest of smirks played on his lips, as though he'd already decided the case before it began. Adriana set down her briefcase, mentally reviewing her notes. She had spent countless hours preparing. She knew the law, she had credible witnesses, and she believed truth would prevail. The question was whether Judge Carlisle would allow that truth to be heard. Reverend Silas Maxwell, a well-respected community leader, had taken it upon himself to be the first witness. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, he clutched a well-worn Bible in one hand, taking his oath on the stand. His testimony painted a stark portrait of the Teflon Twins' history in the neighborhood. He told of traffic stops that turned into violent interrogations, a young man hospitalized with broken ribs, and repeated instances where victims' complaints vanished into thin air. Adriana listened intently, heart pounding. She glanced at the defense table, noting how officers Gleason and Duggan barely flinched. Their lawyer, Robert Morrison, was a seasoned defense attorney with an impeccable record for getting law enforcement off the hook. Adriana knew Morrison would spare no tactic, no matter how aggressive, to keep his clients free. When it was Adriana's turn to question Reverend Maxwell, she carefully laid out each instance of misconduct. Photos of bruised bodies were passed through the court, The gallery murmured in shock at the harsh reality displayed, but Judge Carlisle seemed utterly unimpressed. He regularly interrupted Adriana with pointed questions. Are we certain this injury occurred during an interaction with the officers? Did you personally witness the entire event? Over and over, Carlisle's tone suggested skepticism. The Reverend answered calmly, but frustration darkened Adriana's features. Each time she gained momentum, Carlisle stepped in, redirecting or belittling the gravity of the evidence. Finally, the time came to present video footage. A shaky cell phone recording captured officers Gleason and Duggan dragging a handcuffed teenager across concrete, a battered face, desperate pleas for mercy. There was no disputing that something horrifying had taken place. Tension in the courtroom soared. This, Adriana thought, could be the turning point. She stood, remote control in hand. Your Honor, the following video clearly shows Officer Gleason initiating excessive force. We can see the teen subdued and not resisting. The lights dimmed as the grainy clip flickered on a large screen. Murmurs rippled through the audience. A few people gasped. Even the officer supporters looked uneasy. Gleason shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. But as soon as the video ended, Morrison sprang to his feet. Objection. This clip lacks authenticity. There's no direct evidence tying the date and time to these officers. For all we know, this could be doctored or taken out of context. Adriana had anticipated that move. She offered a timestamp verification and a digital chain of custody form, but before she could hand it over, Judge Carlisle cut in. Ms. Dubois, I'm not convinced this footage meets the necessary standards of credibility. I'll reserve my ruling on its admissibility until you provide further corroboration. The judge's voice reverberated with finality. Adriana's face burned. She had the documentation, but Carlisle's eyes wandered, uninterested. A pang of dread settled in her stomach, as though she were fighting a current too powerful to swim against. Still, she refused to lose composure. There were more witnesses, more evidence, and if the judge wanted corroboration, she would deliver it. Outside, the hallway buzzed with tension during a short recess. Adriana huddled with Reverend Maxwell and other potential witnesses, ensuring they were ready to testify. Each moment, she grew more certain that Carlisle was deliberately trying to undermine the case. Yet, she also sensed a building resolve in the community members who had come to support her. Despite the obstacles, they believed in her. Someone had to expose the truth. Her determination solidified. She silently vowed she wouldn't let this judge or these officers continue to trample over the rights of innocent people. She would fight back with every legal weapon at her disposal. Little did Adriana know, the fight would become more personal than she ever imagined. When the recess ended, Judge Carlisle's demeanor took on a sharper edge. His impatience was palpable as he briskly resumed the hearing. Let's keep this concise, Ms. Dubois. The court's time is valuable, he announced, tapping his gavel. Adriana called her next witness, a single mother named Eleanor Jones, whose harrowing story of a wrongful drug raid had shaken the neighborhood just months ago. During a late-night knock, officers Gleason and Duggan burst into her home without a proper warrant, accusing her of harboring narcotics. Eleanor's frightened child was forced to watch as his mother was pinned to the ground. The raid yielded no drugs, and no charges were filed, but the trauma lingered. Eleanor's voice trembled as she recounted the incident, recounting every detail. How Duggan barked orders at her 9-year-old to stand in the corner. How Gleason kept pressing her face into the carpet even after she was cuffed. Adriana studied the jury box, though this was a motion hearing before the judge, and realized how deeply the story seemed to resonate with the few officials allowed to observe. For a moment, she dared to hope this testimony might finally crack the judge's icy facade. But Carlisle maintained a stoic expression, occasionally glancing toward the defense table. Adriana noticed a flicker of acknowledgement between the judge and Morrison that made her stomach twist. When Eleanor finished her tearful account, Morrison rose for cross-examination. With chilling precision, he painted Eleanor as unreliable. You've had financial troubles, correct, Ms. Jones? And you'd do anything to get money, including filing a frivolous lawsuit against the city, correct? He hammered the notion that Eleanor was seeking a settlement, twisting her words until the emotional weight of her testimony began to crumble in the eyes of the court. Adriana objected several times, but Carlisle repeatedly overruled her. The pattern was glaringly clear. Carlisle was aiding the defense at every turn. He allowed Morrison nearly free rein to poke holes in the witnesses' stories, but clamped down whenever Adriana tried to challenge the officers' accounts. By the end of that day, the hearing felt more like a charade than a genuine pursuit of truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust forward. Adriana offered a composed statement. "We stand by our evidence. We will not be silenced." Yet she felt a growing pit of despair. The Teflon twins seemed poised to escape yet again, courtesy of Judge Carlisle's unwavering shield. An unexpected phone call interrupted her spiral of frustration. A friend from law school who worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. "I caught a snippet of your hearing on the local news," her friend said. "That judge is notorious. You hang in there. We've got an eye on him from the federal side, too." Adriana's brow furrowed. "You do? You mean there's chatter about Carlisle's conduct?" She heard a momentary pause on the other end. "Off the record, yes. Some rumors suggest he's involved in more than just questionable rulings. But it's hush-hush. Keep pushing. If something big comes up, the feds might take notice." Adriana hung up, an uneasy mixture of hope and fear swirling inside her. She had no idea just how explosive things would become, nor how central she would be to bringing Judge Carlisle down. For now, she had to remain steadfast, forging ahead despite the odds. Days turned into weeks as the hearing stretched on. Adriana found herself staring at evidence that should have been more than sufficient to convict any other citizen. But the lines of power in Philadelphia's justice system were knotted, with Carlisle sitting at the apex of a tangled web. Every time Adriana brought forth new witnesses or documents, Carlisle found excuses to dismiss or question them. Whispers circulated among courthouse staff. Rumor had it that Carlisle had deep political connections, starting with his father-in-law, a retired state senator who still pulled strings behind the scenes. Others claimed Carlisle had once been reprimanded by the Judicial Ethics Committee for mishandling funds, but the file had mysteriously vanished. Late one evening, as Adriana was poring over a stack of depositions in her cramped office at the community center, she received a phone call from a blocked number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but instinct guided her to pick up. "MS. Du Bois," a gravelly voice said. "I have information on Carlisle. Meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m., Rittenhouse Square by the fountain." Then the line went dead. She stared at her phone, suspicion and curiosity battling within her. Was this a trap? Some attempt by the defense to rattle her? Or maybe it was someone with the inside scoop, someone fed up with Carlisle's corruption. Adriana weighed the risk. Ultimately, her desire for the truth overcame her caution, and she decided to go. The next evening, she arrived at Rittenhouse Square just before dusk. Even in the fading light, the park was alive with joggers, couples strolling hand in hand, and dog walkers. Adriana's eyes darted around, searching for anyone who might be waiting for her. She found a bench near the ornate fountain and sat. Minutes ticked by. Finally, a tall figure in a trench coat approached. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, keeping his face half hidden. Without sitting down, he spoke. "I'm a paralegal at Carlisle's old firm. Years back, I handled some of his financial paperwork. He accepted donations from the Fraternal Order of Police, a lot of money, and not all of it was accounted for. I have the documents to prove it." Adriana's heart quickened. If Carlisle was illegally accepting money from the police union, that could be the key to exposing his bias. "Why come forward now?" she asked. The man hesitated. "Let's just say I've grown a conscience. I can't watch him manipulate justice any longer. He's done enough damage. People in my office suspect he's also tied up with racketeering, using the courts to pressure businesses and extort money. But it's all rumor, except for this money trail. You want it?" Adriana nodded eagerly, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Yes, this could be huge. But how do I contact you?" He handed her a small flash drive. "All the data is on here. Keep it safe. If you need more, I'll find you." Then he melted back into the crowd. Adriana clutched the flash drive, fully aware this was no small risk. If Carlisle found out she had this information, there was no telling what might happen. But she had to act. The fight for justice was bigger than her fears. Still, she hadn't foreseen just how quickly Carlisle would strike back. The next morning, Adriana woke to her phone vibrating relentlessly. Texts, missed calls, social media messages. Something big had happened. Flipping through her notifications, she saw that a story had broken in a local tabloid. Activist lawyer Adriana Du Bois under investigation for evidence tampering. Her breath caught. Evidence tampering? She'd never done anything remotely like that. Heart pounding, she skimmed the article. It cited anonymous sources within the courthouse claiming that Adriana had falsified witness statements and doctored video footage to frame honorable officers. The piece was a sham, but it was sensational enough to damage her credibility. Soon after, her phone rang again. Reverend Maxwell's voice crackled with alarm. Adriana, the press is hounding me. They're saying we faked everything. This is a smear campaign, and they're not stopping with you. Some are hinting our entire community group is fraudulent. What do we do? Adriana felt her pulse hammering. She forced herself to speak calmly. We hold a press conference. We deny these allegations and stand firm. This is classic retaliation. I'll contact an attorney friend who specializes in defamation. We'll fight this. But she knew how easily the public's trust could be manipulated. Those who had seen the videos, read the depositions, or heard the stories firsthand might stand by her. But countless others would buy into the tabloid narrative, especially if Carlisle and the Teflon twins kept fueling the lie. Later that day, she attended a hastily arranged press conference outside the community center. Cameras snapped and flashed as she stepped up to a small podium. These allegations are baseless, Adriana declared. I have never tampered with any evidence. Our witnesses are real. Their stories are genuine. We have the facts on our side, and we will not be intimidated by cheap tactics. Supporters cheered, but the questions that followed were sharp. What about the recently leaked memo indicating you coached witnesses? Do you deny urging them to exaggerate injuries? The onslaught wore her down, though she remained composed in front of the cameras. When she finally returned to her office, she slumped into a chair, exhaustion radiating through her. She wanted to plug in the flash drive from the paralegal and start building a case against Carlisle, but the day had been consumed by damage control. Just as she steeled herself to examine the files, she received a text from an unknown number. Need to talk. Meet me at the Painted Bride Art Center, 8 p.m. Important info on Carlisle. Adriana was torn. She was desperate for answers, but the timing was suspicious. Could she trust this new tip? Or was it another setup designed to discredit or even harm her? She knew these clandestine meetings were risky, but time was slipping away. Carlisle was clearly ramping up his attacks. She had to stay one step ahead. So she gathered her laptop and the flash drive, left a quick note on her desk for any colleagues who might wonder where she'd gone, and headed out. She told herself that caution was paramount, but she also felt a rising adrenaline, certain that the next confrontation might be the turning point in this entire ordeal. The Painted Bride Art Center was quiet that night, with only a handful of staff putting away folding chairs from an earlier event. Adriana slipped inside, scanning the lobby for any sign of her anonymous contact. A man stood near a mural, hands in his pockets, head lowered. She approached cautiously. "You're here about Carlisle?" she murmured, heart thumping. He lifted his face, revealing a haunted expression. "I'm Detective Michael Avery, Internal Affairs." His voice was low, tense. "I've been investigating Carlisle for months, but I kept hitting dead ends. Looks like we share a common enemy. Internal Affairs?" Adriana's grip tightened on her briefcase. "So you know about his ties to the Teflon twins?" Avery nodded. "I do. They've been funneling money, laundering bribes. Carlisle's got a hand in everything. I've tried to blow the whistle, but every time I file a report, it disappears. High-ranking officers are in on it, covering his tracks." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a slim folder. "I have proof of off-the-book surveillance that Gleason and Duggan have conducted. They've been bugging phone lines, following people around, especially you. They're looking for dirt or a chance to frame you. Watch your back." Adriana felt a chill. So that smear campaign in the press might just be the start. Avery gave a grim nod. "It's how they operate. Discredit anyone who speaks up. I've seen it before. They even tried to dig up stuff on me, threatening to leak personal photos." He extended the folder. Inside were photos of Carlisle meeting with the Teflon twins in a private booth at a high-end steakhouse, plus phone records linking Carlisle's chambers to the officers' personal numbers. "This is enough circumstantial evidence to start a formal inquiry," Avery continued, "but not enough for a guaranteed conviction. We need a smoking gun, like financial records or an eyewitness to a bribe." Adriana recalled the flash drive from the paralegal. "I might have the missing piece. Financial statements that show suspicious donations from the Fraternal Order of Police, possibly more. I just haven't had time to review it thoroughly. Relief flashed across Avery's features. Then let's go somewhere safe and dig into it. My office is compromised, and your community center is too obvious a target. They ended up at a nearby cafe that stayed open late, settling into a corner table away from prying eyes. Adriana opened her laptop, inserted the flash drive, and typed in a password prompt that popped up. She frowned. Seems like it's encrypted. I'll need a few attempts to crack this, or maybe some specialized software. Avery rubbed his temples, exhaustion creeping into his voice. We don't have much time. Carlisle probably already knows we've met. I'd wager he's got your phone tapped. Let's do what we can with the unencrypted portions. They found a series of bank statements tied to a suspicious account labeled CRLD Trust. Each month, large deposits flowed in from a variety of sources, including FOP Fund 775. The amounts were substantial, tens of thousands of dollars. Adriana's suspicions hardened into certainty. Carlisle was on the take, greasing the wheels to keep the Teflon twins safe. As the hours ticked by, the cafe's lights dimmed, hinting closing time was near. Adriana downloaded everything, placed it on a secure server. They parted ways with a plan: gather more evidence, protect their sources, and when the moment was right, expose Carlisle. Adriana felt a flicker of hope even amid the danger. At last, she had allies. The next day in court started like any other. Adriana, tired from her late-night digging, took her seat at the plaintiff's table, Carlisle looming from the bench. He wasted no time launching into a scornful monologue about unsubstantiated claims of police misconduct. The Teflon twins sat smugly, exchanging sideways smiles whenever Carlisle verbally battered Adriana. "Ms. Du Bois," Carlisle drawled. "I trust you've recovered from yesterday's public relations fiasco? Or do you intend to waste this court's time with more questionable evidence?" A hush fell over the courtroom. The tension was electric. Adriana's jaw tightened, but she addressed him steadily. "Your Honor, my only intention is to present the facts, as is my duty." Over the next hour, Adriana called 2 more witnesses to the stand. Each testified about harassment and violence at the hands of the Teflon twins. But once again, Carlisle systematically belittled their testimony, seizing on any minor discrepancy. "You said it happened at 10 p.m., but your statement says 10:15 p.m. Which is it?" His line of questions seemed designed to confuse, not clarify. Behind her, she sensed the frustration of the community members. This was the same old dance, a corrupt judge protecting his own. Yet Adriana remained calm. She knew a new chapter was about to unfold, one Carlisle wouldn't see coming. Midway through the proceedings, the gallery doors swung open. 2 stern-looking officials walked in. One wore the Navy suit and crisp tie typical of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The other carried a briefcase emblazoned with the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Judge Carlisle paused, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "We're in session here. May I ask the purpose of this interruption?" The man from the DOJ stepped forward. "Your Honor, I am Assistant U.S. Attorney Augustus Thorne. We have reason to believe there has been a significant miscarriage of justice taking place in this courtroom. We request a brief recess to speak with you in chambers." Carlisle's face paled momentarily, but he forced a condescending smirk. "This is highly irregular. I can't imagine what grounds the federal government has to intervene in a local matter." Thorne's voice cut him off. "On the grounds of an ongoing federal investigation into judicial corruption, Your Honor." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Adriana allowed herself a subtle sigh of relief. The cavalry had arrived, or so it seemed. She was as stunned as everyone else, not expecting the feds to make such a bold move in open court. Carlisle glared at Thorne, then at Adriana, as if trying to piece together how this had happened. His forced composure cracked for an instant, revealing a flash of panic. "Very well," he growled, slamming his gavel. "Court is in recess for 15 minutes. He swept out, robes trailing behind him, followed by the federal officials. The gallery erupted in buzz. Reporters typed frantically on their phones. Adriana tried to remain stoic, but inside her heart pounded with elation. This was it. Finally, the strong arm of the federal government was stepping in. A small ripple of hope spread among the victims, too. Maybe Carlisle's reign was nearing its end. 15 minutes turned to 30, then an hour. Tension built in the courtroom, which remained abuzz with speculation. Adriana paced near the counsel's table, occasionally whispering reassurances to her witnesses and supporters. It's going to be all right. Just stay calm. Meanwhile, the Teflon twins huddled with their attorney, Morrison, who looked increasingly unsettled. No one knew what was happening behind Carlisle's closed doors. Finally, the doors to the judge's chambers swung open. Carlisle emerged, face flushed, followed by Thorne and the FBI agent. With a forced calm, Carlisle addressed the court. I've spoken with the representatives from the Department of Justice. They have requested additional documentation regarding these proceedings. For the moment, we will suspend this hearing. All parties are to remain available for further questioning. The abrupt end to the day's hearing left everyone in a swirl of confusion. Adriana gathered her paperwork, adrenaline still surging. As she exited the courtroom, Thorne approached her. Ms. Du Bois, he said, I've heard good things about your investigative efforts. I'd like to speak with you privately as soon as possible. They found a quiet hallway. The FBI agent, whose nameplate read Special Agent Adriana Rossi, joined them. Thorne's voice was crisp, but not unkind. We've had Carlisle on our radar for a while, but we needed concrete evidence. Financial records, collusion with police officers, you name it. We've recently acquired some crucial data that may tie everything together. Adriana's heart leaped. I have some documentation too, she volunteered. Bank statements, photographs of meetings, witness testimony. And we're working on decrypting a flash drive that could hold even more details about Carlisle's bribery. Thorne exchanged a glance with Rossi. That aligns with our intent. When you have the drive decrypted, we need it. We'll work together, but keep it quiet. Carlisle isn't the only one under suspicion. Some of his associates hold powerful positions in the city. Adriana nodded, feeling an odd mixture of triumph and trepidation. I understand. I'll be careful, Rossi added. We're also aware of the smear campaign against you. Don't let it intimidate you. We've seen Carlisle and his cronies use these tactics before. As they parted ways, Adriana felt emboldened. The weight of fighting alone had lifted. Now the federal government was involved. But with that relief came a sharper sense of danger. Carlisle would not go down without a fight. She suspected the next moves would be more cunning, more ruthless. That evening, she convened her tight circle of allies, Reverend Maxwell, Detective Avery, and a few trusted community leaders. She explained the events in court. Excitement rippled across their faces, though Reverend Maxwell cautioned, we must remain vigilant. Evil doesn't yield easily. Detective Avery agreed. We're dealing with men who believe they're above the law. We'll need to be ready for anything. Despite the warnings, Adriana felt a glimmer of optimism she hadn't experienced in weeks. Finally, the momentum was on their side. With the U.S. Attorney's Office looking into Carlisle, they had a real chance to bring down the Teflon twins and restore faith in their community. She only prayed that in the final showdown, justice would not be blindfolded once again. In the days that followed, the court proceedings lay in limbo, overshadowed by the federal investigation. The Teflon twins still tried to project an aura of confidence, swaggering around precinct corridors, but rumors flew that internal affairs was closing in on them. Meanwhile, Judge Carlisle maintained a subdued presence. He came to the courthouse only for essential duties and avoided public appearances. Adriana stayed busy decrypting the flash drive. With help from a tech-savvy friend, she managed to unlock a hidden folder. Inside, she found a trove of incriminating files, emails between Carlisle and certain police union officials, references to large loans that were never repaid, and coded discussions about handling uncooperative lawyers and witnesses. Each new discovery sent a jolt of shock and fury through Adriana, but she was careful, backing up everything and transferring duplicates to Thorne and Rossi. Then came a call that changed everything. Adriana, it's Augustus Thorne, the AUSA said. We've been monitoring your progress. The U.S. Attorney's Office is looking for fresh talent, someone who understands this case inside and out, someone who's personally invested in justice for the community. Adriana's eyes widened as he continued. You've shown skill, resilience, and an unflinching commitment to the truth. How would you feel about joining our team as a special assistant U.S. attorney, specifically to prosecute Carlisle and his associates? For a moment, her mind spun. She had only recently passed the bar, had never considered a federal position so soon. But the opportunity was too significant to dismiss. This wasn't just a career move. It was a chance to stand toe-to-toe with corruption at the highest level, armed with the full weight of federal authority. She had to catch her breath before responding. Yes, of course. I would be honored. Thorne chuckled. That's the spirit. We'll fast-track the paperwork. Keep this quiet until we make it official. Carlyle's watchers are everywhere. Days later, it was official. Adriana Dubois was sworn in as a special assistant U.S. attorney. The ceremony was private, witnessed only by a handful of DOJ officials, including Thorne and Rossi. Adriana felt goosebumps as she raised her right hand and recited the oath to uphold the Constitution. She thought of the many victims who had been silenced in Carlyle's courtroom. She swore she would not fail them. Meanwhile, word leaked that a young black attorney was about to lead the federal case against Carlyle, someone who had once been dismissed and humiliated right in his courtroom. Whispers of karmic comeuppance spread through the legal community. The press speculated wildly. Judge Carlyle in the hot seat. Will his past cases be overturned? For every supporter Carlyle had, there were now a dozen critics publicly demanding his resignation. Yet the judge still showed no sign of capitulation. He continued to rule on minor cases, ignoring calls to step aside. Behind the scenes, his legal team scrambled, preparing a counter-narrative of innocence. They insisted he was a victim of a political witch hunt and that Adriana was biased due to her prior activism. Adriana, for her part, remained focused. She spent long hours at the U.S. Attorney's office, sifting through volumes of evidence, drafting motions, and refining strategies with her new colleagues. Each evening, she locked her door and asked for an escort home. Carlyle's goons might still try something dangerous. The Teflon twins had vanished from public view, rumored to be under administrative leave pending further investigation. She suspected they were cornered, desperate, and possibly more lethal than ever. In the hush of night, she'd lie awake and reflect on how much had changed. She was no longer the overworked community lawyer fighting an uphill battle alone. She was a newly minted federal prosecutor armed with unstoppable evidence. The stage was set for a clash that would shake Philadelphia's justice system to its core. The hearing for Carlyle's preliminary injunction took place in a federal courtroom, a venue far more imposing than Carlyle's old haunt. Rows of gleaming benches faced an imposing dais. The presiding federal judge was known for fairness and an intolerance for theatrics. Cameras lined the hallway, reporters jostled for positions, and crowds gathered outside, holding signs reading, "Justice for our community," and "Carlyle must pay." Adriana arrived early, flanked by Thorne and Rossi. Clad in a crisp black suit, she felt nerves dance in her stomach, but also a steely resolve. This was what she had trained for, what her experience in Carlyle's court had prepared her to face. When Carlyle entered, this time as the defendant, not the presiding judge, whispers rippled through the gallery. He looked older, more haggard, like a man under siege. His defense attorney, a high-profile litigator named Isabel Moreau, exuded cool confidence. They took their seats, Carlyle glancing at Adriana with open disdain. Opening statements began. Thorne handled the broad strokes, outlining the Department of Justice's case. Evidence of financial impropriety, collusion with known corrupt officers, and obstruction of justice. Then he handed the floor to Adriana for a more detailed presentation. She took a moment to steady herself, then stepped forward. "Your Honor, for years, Judge Ivan Carlyle has abused his position of authority to shield police officers who commit brutality and to amass illicit funds from special interest groups. We will prove beyond a doubt that his courtroom was never about justice, but about profit and power." She methodically laid out the evidence: bank statements, emails, the newly decrypted flash drives incriminating details. Screens displayed charts of Carlyle's unexplained wealth, the suspicious transactions from police union accounts, and the hush money paid to silence potential whistleblowers. Each new slide elicited low gasps from the audience. Moreau tried to poke holes in the evidence, claiming some documents might be forged or taken out of context. She pressed Adriana on her previous activism, insinuating that Adriana had a personal vendetta against Carlyle and could be using her newfound authority to settle a score. Adriana calmly rebutted, "My personal history with the defendant is precisely why I took this case. I know how his corruption manifests in the real world, harming innocent citizens. The facts stand on their own." Spectators were riveted. This trial held all the drama of a high-stakes scandal, a rising star prosecutor confronting a once untouchable judge. The Teflon twins even made an appearance in the gallery, shooting dark looks at Adriana. She felt the weight of their hatred, but also the surge of communal support. By the second day of hearings, more damning testimony emerged. Detective Avery took the stand, describing how Carlisle and the Teflon twins had conspired to hide or destroy evidence in police brutality cases. His detailed accounts of intimidation tactics stunned the courtroom. Yet the most devastating blow came from an unlikely source: Carlisle's own former law clerk, who admitted under oath that she had seen sealed case files tampered with, rulings pre-written by police union lawyers, and checks that never went through official channels. By the time Adriana finished cross-examining her, the prosecution's case was airtight. No longer could Carlisle's supporters argue this was all fabricated. Every piece fit together into a chilling puzzle of systemic corruption. The judge on the bench announced a short recess before delivering rulings on key motions. As Adriana returned to her seat, she caught Carlisle glaring at her with fury and fear. For the first time, she sensed that he believed he might actually lose it all. The final day of the hearing arrived. Spectators packed the gallery, lining the walls when the benches ran out of space. Even the balcony was crowded with onlookers, community members, law students, curious citizens, all eager to witness the historic moment. Federal Judge Michael Carson entered, face stern, gavel in hand. "Order in the court," he said quietly, and a hush fell. He turned to Carlisle and his defense team. "After carefully reviewing the evidence, it's clear we have a serious matter of federal jurisdiction. This court finds sufficient probable cause to proceed with a full criminal trial on charges including racketeering, bribery, and obstruction of justice." At the declaration, cameras clicked and reporters scrambled for updates. Carlisle's face went ghostly white. Moreau tried to object, but Judge Carson continued. "Bail will be set at a high amount, and the defendant will surrender his passport." He banged his gavel, signaling an end to the hearing. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the gallery. Adriana allowed herself a relieved smile, though she knew the fight wasn't over. This was just the prelude to a larger criminal trial. Carlisle still had resources and connections, but for now, justice was advancing. As the courtroom emptied, Carlisle lingered. Adriana noticed him staring at her with an eerie intensity. He walked over, ignoring the warnings of his own attorney. "This isn't over, Ms. Du Bois," he hissed. "You might think you've won, but I know you're kind. Always out for a quick victory, never seeing the bigger picture." She looked him straight in the eye. "The bigger picture is justice for the people you've harmed, a concept you clearly don't understand." He sneered, turning away, but not before whispering, "You'll regret ever stepping foot in my courtroom." His words unsettled her, but as she stepped outside, the sight of chanting supporters lifted her spirits. Reporters clamored for quotes, and she gave a measured statement. "This is a step forward for justice in Philadelphia. We must remain vigilant. True equality under the law requires that even those in positions of power be held accountable." Over the next few weeks, Carlisle's criminal trial date was set, a swirl of media speculation swirling around it. Adriana anticipated a protracted legal battle, but something unexpected happened. One of Carlisle's closest associates caved under pressure and decided to testify against him. This friend possessed records of clandestine meetings, messages that Carlisle had sent, evidence so damning it could single-handedly guarantee conviction. When Carlisle learned of the betrayal, he panicked. He pleaded not to be detained pre-trial, citing health concerns, but the federal judge denied his request. Soon, the Teflon twins were named as co-conspirators in the expanded indictment, and they too were arrested. The men who had lorded power over the streets for so long now found themselves on the other side of cold steel bars. For Adriana, each day felt surreal. The system that once spat her out was now the very system she wielded to topple corruption. A hush fell over the city as they waited for the final outcome. In quiet corners of Philadelphia, people whispered about how the unstoppable Carlisle had finally been brought low by a determined black woman who refused to be silenced. Sunlight slanted through the towering windows of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, illuminating the polished wood floors and the rows of pew-like benches in the large federal courtroom. Outside, the October air was brisk. Autumn leaves swirled along the sidewalks where onlookers had gathered, some clutching handwritten signs that read, "Justice for our community," and "Corruption ends here." Within, an electric tension hovered. This day would decide the fate of Judge Ivan Carlisle and the infamous Teflon twins. Adriana Dubois arrived early, flanked by her mentor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Augustus Thorne, and Special Agent Adriana Rossi from the FBI. Although her position as a newly minted Special Assistant U.S. Attorney meant she carried significant weight, Adriana still felt the flood of nervous energy low in her gut. In just a few moments, she would see the same man who had once humiliated her in open court stand as a defendant fighting for his own freedom. That role reversal felt as surreal as it was gratifying. The gallery was packed. Community members, law school students, off-duty reporters, and curious citizens filled every seat and lined the walls, pushing for a vantage point. A hush settled when Ivan Carlisle was let in. Gone was the imposing figure in black robes. Today, Carlisle wore a plain navy suit, his eyes ringed with fatigue. Behind him, officers Daniel Gleason and Peter Duggan, formerly so cocky they were nicknamed the Teflon Twins, shuffled forward in matching grimaces, hands clasped before them as though they anticipated handcuffs at any moment. The presiding judge, the Honorable Michael Carson, entered with a measured gait, dark robes draping his broad shoulders. The bailiff called for order, and the silence in the courtroom became absolute, as if every breath was being held. All eyes flicked toward the jury box, where 12 solemn faces observed the scene. They had deliberated for 2 days, wrestling with testimony, documents, and evidence that painted a chilling portrait of judicial corruption. Adriana studied Carlisle's demeanor from her seat at the prosecution table. She could almost sense the desperation leaking from his guarded expression. Over the past weeks, she had watched him attempt every legal maneuver, every rhetorical flourish, to defend himself, but the mountain of evidence was overwhelming. Secret bank ledgers, email trails, testimonies from multiple whistleblowers. In the end, Carlisle's carefully erected facade had collapsed like a house of cards. The jurors rose as their foreperson, a middle-aged woman in a smart, gray blazer, delivered the verdict in a voice that cut through the air like a scalpel. We the jury find the defendant Ivan Carlisle guilty on all counts. A collective gasp swept the room. Murmurs of relief and exultation rippled through the gallery, though Judge Carson quickly signaled for silence with a sharp rap of his gavel. Adriana's heart pounded so violently she could feel it in her ears. It had happened. The once untouchable judge was officially convicted. Carlisle stood there, seemingly paralyzed, his mouth parted slightly as if to protest, but words failed him. Where before he had exuded an icy confidence, he now appeared visibly shaken. His gaze flicked in Adriana's direction, brimful of resentment and regret. For a beat, their eyes met, and she wondered how he felt in that moment, knowing that the very person he had treated so dismissively was instrumental in unmasking his corruption. Yet the trial was not quite over. Next came the sentencing phase, and Judge Carson, known for his clear-eyed approach to justice, wasted no time. He had followed every detail of the trial with meticulous care. From the bench, his voice was measured yet stern as he recounted the gravity of Carlisle's offenses. This courtroom has witnessed an egregious betrayal of public trust, Judge Carson pronounced, his baritone echoing in the rafters. As a judicial officer, you wielded immense power over people's lives. That power was meant to uphold justice, protect the innocent, and punish the guilty. Instead, you used it to enrich yourself and perpetuate systemic abuse. Adriana watched Carlisle stiffen at the judge's words, anger briefly flashing across his features. But any illusions he might have held about leniency evaporated as Carson continued. In light of the overwhelming evidence, bank statements, collusion with law enforcement officials, obstruction of justice in multiple cases, and the irreparable harm inflicted upon innocent victims, this court can only conclude that a severe sentence is warranted. With a resolute gaze, Judge Carson turned to the Teflon Twins, who sat at their own counsel table. Officers Gleason and Duggan had pleaded guilty to a range of federal charges, including conspiracy and civil rights violations, hoping for some modicum of mercy. Their heads hung low. For your involvement, Officers Gleason and Duggan, you are also found guilty, Carson declared. You will serve significant prison terms. Let it be a message to every public servant that your badge does not place you above the law. Now, the judge faced Carlisle again, pausing for effect. A palpable hush gripped the room. This court sentences you, Ivan Carlisle, to 20 years in federal prison. A collective exhalation seemed to sweep through the spectators. A few people broke into muffled applause, which the bailiff promptly halted. Others wept openly, victims of Carlyle's regime who had waited months or years for this moment. Reverend Silas Maxwell, seated in the front row, bowed his head, tears staining his cheeks. Detective Michael Avery, the internal affairs officer who had risked his career to reveal the truth, simply stared straight ahead, relief and exhaustion etched in his features. Adriana's throat felt tight. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, letting the reality wash over her. This was not a moment of hollow victory or smug satisfaction. It was a testament to resilience, community solidarity, and the unwavering principle that justice should serve everyone equally. A flourish of administrative tasks followed: terms of Carlyle's remand, discussion of restitution to certain victims, and instructions for the official record. The Teflon twins were escorted out first, heads lowered, their once intimidating presences wholly deflated. Then came Carlyle, ankles and wrists soon to be bound by the same system he had once manipulated so masterfully. As soon as court was adjourned, the gallery erupted in a tidal wave of chatter and emotion. The heavy wooden doors opened, and reporters outside clamored for statements. Adriana stepped into the crisp afternoon air, feeling it fill her lungs like a promise of renewal. A throng of microphones and cameras pivoted toward her. Flashes went off, and voices overlapped. Ms. Du Bois, can you comment on the significance of this verdict? How do you feel about bringing down the judge who once dismissed your claims? What message does this send to corrupt officials everywhere? She held up a hand to quiet the reporters. I believe today's outcome proves that no one, even those in positions of authority, can escape accountability forever. This victory belongs to the community who refused to be silenced, to the brave whistleblowers who risked everything, and to all who still believe in the power of the law when wielded with integrity. At her side, Assistant U.S. Attorney Thorne nodded, stepping in to reinforce her words. Special Agent Rossi stood behind them, representing the federal law enforcement team that had worked tirelessly to piece together the case. For a fleeting moment, Adriana's mind flashed back to her earliest days, standing alone in a hostile courtroom, doubted and demeaned. Now, she was far from alone. As she scanned the crowd, her gaze landed on faces once filled with anger and despair, now lit with vindication. A mother whose home had been wrongfully raided, a teenager who had been brutally beaten but never saw justice until now, a father who had lost faith in the system only to witness its redemption in this very trial. The news crews continued broadcasting live, capturing a once-in-a-generation moment in Philadelphia's legal history. Standing on those courthouse steps, Adriana felt an unspoken acknowledgement. The real work had just begun. While Carlyle's downfall was a watershed, systemic change would require enduring vigilance. Corruption might have lost a powerful ally, but it could always find another face if people looked away. Still, for that moment, stirred by a brisk wind and the weight of a momentous triumph, Adriana permitted herself a silent affirmation. The seed she'd planted in the darkest hours had borne fruit. She had confronted the man who sought to humiliate her, had forced him to answer for his crimes, and had secured a measure of justice for countless victims who thought the system had abandoned them. As the camera lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, Adriana stood a little straighter, shoulders squared. She had upheld the oath she took upon becoming a lawyer, to champion those who lacked a voice and to defend the rule of law against all who would abuse it. In the end, the reign of a corrupt judge collapsed under the weight of truth, and in its place, a new pillar of hope rose for everyone who dared to believe that justice, though often delayed, was never truly out of reach.